on the surface, this appears to be a pretty strong rally here, or is there some sort of, obfuscation going on here that I just don't know about?
I mean,
beautifully
Did you like
said.
that?
Beautifully said.
That's a good SAT word, but it's definitely been, the yen strength has been undeniable. Yeah. It's gained against every single G10 currency this year, and it's gained, over 3% against the dollar this year, in a year that's really been defined by super tight ranges in G10 FX especially. So it definitely just speaks to this broader haven rush we're seeing across assets. The fact that hedge funds have finally decided, all right, it's time to get long.
Does the yen, this is a sort of a bigger picture question, still hold its name as the safe haven? I mean, when you think of Swiss or yen, you think classic safe havens. Does that trade still work?
I would say it does. And talking to people in the market, it's definitely the safe haven of choice. I mean, when you consider the other flight to quality currencies that people typically choose, you have the Swiss franc, as you mentioned, and there's some concern that that could, have some contagion risk from a broader European slowdown. And when you look at the dollar, it's sort of the epicenter of trade tensions, whereas the yen is really just a clean choice. And it does have that very strong bid from Japanese investors repatriating their savings back home when you get these risk-off pockets that we've been seeing over the last few weeks.
Much to the frustration of the BOJ and indeed leadership in Japan. We saw it with the Swiss franc when they had to move into the market and revalue or devalue. Is there any risk that the haven status could be called into question because the BOJ fights it so hard?
That's definitely a big question swirling around markets right now. At 105, I wouldn't say anyone's worried about it yet, but once you start to see 100 levels potentially below there, that's when worry really rises that, the BOJ might get a little uncomfortable, might step in to stem that.
All right, so this may be a dumb question, but I don't understand. Explain to me, the yen has held up pretty well given all the issues we've seen in Japan over the last, 2 decades now. What does that sort of mean for the dollar if we do sort of head down this road here in the U.S. to negative rates, if that does happen, but just really this sort of lower for longer environment? Does this sort of mean that then the dollar has that potential to really hold up in the same way that the yen has?
Well, it's kind of the beauty of currency is that it's a relative price.
Right.
So, I mean, in talking with people about worst case scenarios, if we do hit a global slowdown, what happens? Who's the real winner here? And people say it's the dollar, it's the yen broadly, and then in terms of, where dollar yen goes, it's really, it'll depend on how it shakes out. It's hard to say the yen versus the dollar, who the ultimate safe haven is.
Well, you talk about dollar yen, you come into my terminal here, what you're seeing on the screen, those are just 1% moves. And you're seeing frequent 1 standard deviation moves relatively frequently. Of course, perhaps 2 standard deviation moves when you really get a lot of those trade fears. I wonder what currency strategists say about sort of the future. I've heard the yen's the classic widowmaker, and I've also heard currency strategists say yen can go further given the heightened geopolitical risk that we still keep hearing about.
Right. Well, I was speaking with Credit Suisse for this story yesterday, and they have a 100 forecast for yen in the next 12 months, but it can be a kind of painful trade. If you zoom back to January, there's this currency witching hour that people always dread. It's that handover from New York to Asian trading when there's very low liquidity. And I think it was bad Apple earnings that set it off back in January. When you get a surprise, shock, risk-off event in that certain hour or periods of low liquidity, you can really see, dollar yen move and take out a lot of people right at the same time.